Hello. Thanks for joining this roundtable panel, as we want to call it. We have a great lineup of panelists today. I won't do an introduction. I will let them introduce themselves in a moment, but just few names. We have Khalifa next to me, who also delivered one of the trainings here in the conference just a few days ago. We have Tim. We had a talk a few hours ago, this morning, in one of the main track. We have Nicola from the, Barb Suite training, very famous one. And then we have one other guy that we found in the hall.
They needed me to be here to fill a seat.
Thank you, Dylan, for joining and for hosting us today. So I hope you are having fun at the conference. Hope you participate in the ComSec track and you enjoy the talks that we have so far. Tomorrow we're going to have another good set, so stick around. And I will start with a question regarding, so the topic of our panel is about the cybersecurity training world in 2023. How is evolving in the past few years, since we have some impact that we all know very well. And we have different trainers with different, I hope, different point of view. We have Dylan from an organizational point of view, from a conference point of view, that can share some insight about what's going on behind the scene, how this type of trainings are organized. So I hope we will get some interesting insight from who is behind, who is on top of this industry. So in order to start, on top of the introduction, guys, that I like you to do to the audience, I want to start with a very common question, like how did you see the industry change in the past, let's pick a random year, 2020, from 2020 to today? What changes did you see happen? Khalifa, if you want to start.
First of all, thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. First of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Khalifa Shamsi, and I'm almost having 13 years of experience between the incident handling part within the government in the United Arab Emirates and also the pen testing part, the offensive side of the security. I have established my company, which is specialized in the pen testing and the offensive security services and also providing the cyber defense services. And also I'm delivering the training within Hack in the Box, which is about the abusing Active Directory on-prem and Azure. So regarding your questions, yes, we have noticed a lot of, actually the whole cybersecurity industry, became a bit bigger after the COVID 2020. And according to this increase in the demand of the cybersecurity, also the cybersecurity training part also has a lot of changes. For example, we've noticed that there is more demand on the online cybersecurity training than the live. So, and after that, we saw also a lot of new companies have been established, which are specialized in the online platform trainings. So this is, I think, the major change that I've noticed since 2020.
Okay, so for online training, actually, Tim, I think you started delivering, or actually you are moving a lot of your training on the online format.
Yes, exactly. So, hi, Esma, I'm Tim. I'm reverse engineering since 20 years now. I did my PhD on formal program analysis and founded a company with some other guys where we do binary rewriting to add embedded security. And besides, I also started giving trainings around 2017 on software deobfuscation and in general advanced reverse engineering. And yeah, the first years I started on conference trainings and also on private trainings. And then 2020 COVID happened. And then I more or less reinvented the training business from my own and basically started giving online trainings. And I noticed that there's quite different audience going on. You have to adapt first in terms of how you teach, because you don't go around anymore. Instead, you have to talk into a webcam, have to use additional communication channels like Discord, and see that people are going well. So basically, you have to take similar concepts and put it into an online environment. But this works quite well, and also gives other students the opportunity to participate in trainings which wouldn't go, because going to a con needs, you have to travel, you need to do you have to allocate more time for traveling, more travel expenses and stuff like that. And so for instance, going to the States from Europe or something like that is 5K travel alone. And so with online trainings, people are way more flexible in terms of who can participate, how they can participate. Sometimes I have a training in the EU time zone where people stand up at 1 a.m. their time to participate in trainings. And for they like the topic, and they have no other possibility to take such trainings. And therefore, I think it's a great opportunity, which I started to keep after COVID went back into something. Well, the world changed back to normal.
And Nicola, since you have probably the most experience in terms of trainings out of the audience now, and probably together with the organizing side. Let me extend the question. So let's not just see at COVID and the latest few years, but let's go even further back. How do you see the industry change in the past years?
Okay, so I'm Nicolas Grégoire. I'm the official Burp Suite trainer for Europe. So I see like more than 100 students every year, and we all cover exclusively web stuff, Burp Suite itself. And the evolution I see outside of course, COVID, which impacted our job a lot, is mostly the specialization. Like when I started 20 years ago, we were doing a bit of everything, like a bit of web, a bit of Windows network, a bit of RFID technologies. I mean, everything at the same time. Nowadays, my students are most of the time full-time web penetration testers. So I clearly see some specialization. I think it's good for the quality of the job which is delivered. Like they are doing it all the time. And from my point of view as a trainer, it made a nice pool of possible students. So I won't complain from a business point of view. That's good. It's easy to identify my possible customers, but that's the biggest change I noticed outside of course, COVID and migrating to online courses.
From an organization point of view, I guess we have no better exponent.
Yeah, I mean, COVID changed a lot of things because in the past, number one, accessibility. So most people would just fly to a conference, go for the training, and it's in person, and then that's it, right? As soon as COVID happened and we announced online virtual trainings, the pushback was, it's not the same. And yeah, of course, it's not the same, dude. Like, there's a pandemic, man. You can't go anywhere, right? Like, what do you want us to do about it, right? However, now people have gotten so used to doing online trainings, but it's only because the technology has evolved with it. When we first started, it was Zoom, and Zoom, that was it. And then, like Tim was mentioning, you have Discord and other tools that you add on. But, now we have like fully cloud-based labs that you can replay over 4 weeks, 6 weeks, that you get access to it. So it's beyond just going for a 2-day class. You can actually get to practice. And that has changed a lot. So, most people now see it as like, do I really need to fly all the way to Amsterdam? Maybe yes, it's fun, right? Like, not say it's not fun, right? But for the training part of it, you can get the same value, from your house. And maybe even better value because, less things to distract you outside and, less entertaining things that you can go and get into trouble with. But yeah, it's definitely, the technology has helped a lot.
You launch with Hack in the Box, a dedicated brand, right, for the training part. And based on this bigger data set? Do you see a preference nowadays? Is it people actually more interested in the online besides the extra cost in terms of perceived quality of what they learn?
So actually, it's a mix, because you get folks who normally wouldn't be able to go because of the, like Tim said, the travel costs alone. So they need to apply for the travel and then pay the hotel and everything else. That now at least they only need to pay for the training. So the amount that they need to spend is slightly less. So accessibility, but also companies have now decided, okay, so who gets to travel will be a different, more senior engineer guys who get to go on site and come for on site training. But they'll still at least have the more junior guys be able to do the online version, for example. So that's one of the things.
Cool. And I'll start from you again now with the next question. So in the industry in general, in cybersecurity, there is always this complaint about the lack of resources, the lack of skilled people that can take the amount of job that is supposedly available within the industry. And often is a complaint regarding how the academia is training the people in the cybersecurity domain. So from a conference point of view, where you offer a wide range of different trainings, do you see that the vertical training industry, so the industry that you represent and everyone here represents, is it supporting, is it doing enough to solve this challenge, or do you see some lack of, for example, collaboration with academia, universities, and other entities that are always trying to solve this problem?
Definitely, there's not enough collaboration. I mean, that's a hands down thing. Like all of the training providers are commercial entities, right? I mean, even Hack in the Box is a commercial entity, right? With the exception being that we do work with some universities to try and make sure that the syllabuses are changing with the times, because the education system is missing a gap, like a huge gap. The industry needs people that know X, Y, and Z, but the education industry is producing A, B, and C. So it's that kind of how do we bridge that gap, right? Not really enough is really being done, but then again, whose fault is that? I don't think you can say, it's company's fault for not investing more into the education system, but you can also say it's the university's fault for not evolving, because the teachers need to know the subject in order to teach it. And it's the subjects are changing, as in the technology is changing so quickly, security is changing so quickly, that how can you expect them to develop a syllabus that's teachable repeatedly that also still caters to cutting edge? You can't, right? So it's kind of also as a student, you kind of need to take matters into your own hands, right? If you need to learn something because you have a job that needs to be solved, that's kind of on you. You know what I mean? You can't really say my school sucks.
Cool. And Nicola, yesterday when we were presenting ourselves before the panel, you mentioned that sometimes you have clients, companies that together with the, let's say, normal employee or the expert of the domain that they want to train, they also send interns or students to your training. Mm-hmm. Do you see the value in having those people attending those training, even if maybe they are not yet at the level of actually learning as much as possible or learning the full-fledged of knowledge that you share? Or do you think there should be some intermediate step, like a learning path in order for them to reach these vertical trainings?
I really think that going to school won't be enough to be successful in this career, whatever the school is. There's so many activities you can practice on the side. I think the most critical one will be CTF or whatever online challenges, because you already have to practice on real targets. Real vulnerabilities at least. And I don't see, as Dylan said, a school could maintain a perfectly state-of-the-art syllabus every year. We are I'm a full-time trainer, and that's a large part of my activity is maintaining the training itself. So I think it's nearly impossible for a school. And the interns I see during my private sessions, if they practice on their side, usually they get quite some value from the training, like the seasoned penetration testers. And on the opposite, you may have 10 years of experience, or let's say 15 years of experience as a web tester. If you don't practice your skills, you are still doing it like 10 years ago, which is a shame. And so I think that either young or older testers, they need to keep learning, like for your whole career. It's if not, you will go down, like you will get worse and worse.
Cool. And Tim, you mentioned that you collaborate quite often and quite a lot strictly with the university. What's your point of view from the academia also side of things?
Well, I think it's you target things on different levels. At academia or at university, you teach graduates or undergraduates, which basically have to know some basics to get things done, but also have some very specific courses where they can focus on and specialize in certain topics. However, these things the students they learn, but might not need ever. So, or only need a subset of that. And in professional trainings, however, people are usually sent in and are really, really motivated to hear this because they pay for that, because they want to learn something. Also, students also want often to learn. It depends if you get bachelor or master courses, for instance. But in industry, you usually have that everybody wants to learn the maximum because it's their expertise, the domains that they need, that they help to create money and basically to learn things, that they get faster and better in things and solve problems they work on in daily life. And therefore, yes, I see these are two different topics, and I think teaching both classes and on both levels is important.
Nice. Khalif, I want to jump on another item with you, since you started the delivering your training a couple of years ago, kind of, at least at conferences, right? I just want to understand how was the process in terms of how did you decide the topic, first of all, and how did you decide that conference was the right format for that type of training?
Yeah. First of all, before I was a trainer. Also, I was a student in some classes and I was a student in some trainings. What I noticed that a lot of the content and a lot of the content within the trainings and curriculum that are being used are always like following the shortcuts for the learning curve. Like a lot of people, get attracted to such topics. And it makes sense because, it shows like it will be a shortcut. For example, following the trends like bug bounty, like going to find bug, but at the end you are not understanding what's happening behind the logic. So I decided that, of course, with my partner Tariq, who is not here, we decided that we want to develop something that is, like a little bit deviates from what's in the market, trending in the market. And we wanted to focus on something that at least the students will come out with understanding things like as a logic, how things are happening and how things are really like done in the background and behind the scene. So this is how was like we started to think about delivering this training. And the second thing is we decided, of course, the conference, because to show that to target, like I think the conferences, like for example Hack in the Box, will allow you to target the most of the people and the audiences as possible.
Okay. And Tim, instead, I have a slightly variation of the same question. So when you started, you deliver the same training to both B2B, let's say corporate clients, as well as conferences. How do you decide? Not how you decide, but how do you tailor the content from one side to the other? Is it really a difference between the two?
Yes, actually, sometimes it is, sometimes not. So for me, conference trainings are first, how long is the conference? What's the target audience of the conference? And then I maybe give a lightweight version of that or a more in-depth version. But the program is more or less fixed. And then the audience, in the audience, you have people from all over the place with different backgrounds. For instance, in my case, some do software protection, some do reverse engineering, some have a malware background. So you have to handle things like, you can't go too fast, you can't go too slow, because everybody has to learn something. So you have to take care of additional tasks for the people who are way beyond all others, and the people you have to also to take some special care of the people who you left yesterday somewhere, that you can have to help them somewhere else. So, but in the end, it's your job as a trainer to basically see that everybody goes around to some point. For private trainings, things are way more flexible. For instance, if you give private trainings, the companies, they ask me, they basically have a clear focus in mind. They have clear goals, what they are working on, what their people need, what they go, and also they have often a comparable background. Like they do always the same. So basically they are compiler engineers and have a similar background knowledge, or they focus on malware and have a more focus there, or something like that. And so the level are similar, and the learning goals are also clear. And for these people, I always recommend talking about what their skill level is, what their budget is, so how long they have time. So for 4 days or 3 days or 5 days makes a difference in costs, but also in persons and time requirements. And then I see what they are most interested in, and then tailor my program in a way such that they learn the most. So for instance, I could go with the same slide deck to one company and do it in 2 days, while for others in 4 days, based on the background and things they might to skip and stuff like that.
So, Tim, based on what you said, I'm wondering, so maybe from a conference point of view is also a very useful, let's say, marketing tool, because you can reach heterogeneous audience coming from different companies, from different entities and so on. And then that could be with word of mouth, an opportunity for you to follow up with certain customers. So do you see in the private training also the opportunity to have additional courses to cover more material, so some kind of training program than a vertical class?
Yes. So basically in the end, everything plays together somehow. If I give public conference trainings, people get some attention and might come back. Hey, I do have a whole team here. Can you give it the same training or a similar version of that by us on site and private? Or also, if I give something in private, I learn perhaps more about in-depth problems they're tackling and get aware of additional use cases that I haven't in mind before. Or also learn that something is related, also I didn't cover it before, and might add it to my public training classes or something like that. So yeah. If I also give talks, people come to me and say, hey, I have this use case and hey, this is interesting, let's talk about that. And then there maybe also might be part of training afterward. So everything combines as
it's
a whole.
Connected at a certain point. I see. And Nicola, your training is very tailored, and then you're doing this training for now quite some time. How did you decide that was an interesting topic years ago?
So the training started like 8 years ago. I became an official trainer for Porttrigger 8 years ago. So the training started like 10 years ago. And it started by a talk, just giving a talk, not Hack in the Box. It was OWASP at SEC.
Let's say it was Hack in the Box. No one remembers.
It was Hack in the Box. What a great talk. And it was 1 hour of tips and tricks on efficiency in Burp Suite, and the feedback was very positive. And but I had always the same question, like, I get the idea of this part of the tool, but it's hard to get it in practice. So I decided to create a workshop. So a 2-hour workshop I gave for free in Switzerland at Insomniac. Then it morphed in a 4 hours workshop. Then one day, then I got my first training at Hack in the Box in 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Then it went slowly. So I was able to notice the interest from the industry. And so that's the first part, like you need customers. But of course, it took me a lot of time to build the content. Currently, I have 4 days, more than 150 challenges. And that's a lot of work. And I think it's nearly impossible to start from zero and to build let's say a 3 or 4 day training from zero. You need to go through workshops or smaller versions of your content.
So yeah, that's also create the feedback from the audience that the topic that you are teaching is actually of interest, and
yes,
the feedback is positive. Maybe we can do a bit more until you reach enough corpus of content to actually have a multi-days.
Yeah,
trainings.
exactly. And the feedback is useful, as you said, for what should I cover, but also of regarding how to cover it. Like everything which is clear for you maybe not be clear for the whole classroom. And so there's a lot of adaptation to, as a trainer, I think you need to be good at your subject, of course, and you need to be good at teaching. And this is something you will learn by doing it, because I never went to the school to learn how to teach. And so you need to take that into account and
experience.
How to manage time, breaks, slow users, fast users. That's a challenge. So that's what I like.
So Dylan, I guess the feedback is also one of the way that you can use to decide if a training can come to the conference or will be part of the lineup in a conference. And that works maybe with trainers such as Nicola with 10 years of experience. You know that if you bring his training to the event, people are interested because the training is working so well for the past 10 years. But what are the other mechanisms that you use to evaluate if a new training makes sense? It's about the type of the conference, or maybe when Hack in the Box Amsterdam have set a certain type of audience, maybe in Singapore, when we have Singapore, different types. What are the tools that you use to decide? You and the team, of course.
Well, there isn't really a mechanism that we use, to be honest. We get a lot of people writing in. And so most of the time we try to depend on that they've run it before. And then what's the audience feedback from previous events that have been run. But also a lot of times we have, like for example in Singapore, the government is one of our biggest customers. And they have specific needs, as in specific topics that they need to be trained on. And so we'll work backwards in the sense that we kind of look at what trainings might be available or who are the subject matter experts in this particular area. Maybe reach out to them directly and say, hey, have you considered doing training? Because maybe you have some material, but not really thought about doing a class. And sometimes it could be that, it could be a lab. Maybe they just start out with something small, like a 2-hour, 4-hour thing. And then, from there, they kind of develop the content as well. So it's a bit of both. As in sometimes the content comes to us, we have to select it. Sometimes we look for the content and match it with what the customer might want. And then sometimes, yeah.
Did you often to see that a training that works very well online, or when you do it in person, it doesn't work as well, or vice versa? A training that you always had in the in-person conference and always worked very well on the online, it's not as good as it is in person.
Like Slavomir's class, there's a Bluetooth RFID training. You need the hardware. So his class, even though we virtualized it, we had to send the hardware to people because you can't do the training without the tools. And if I just explain the concept, but you don't have the devices to, clone stuff and, follow along, that's, doesn't really work so well. And also, certain things are just more easily explained in person. As in, when I'm one-on-one with you, I can come to your computer and actually show it to you Well, suppose when it's virtual, I have to share screen or take over your computer and kind of show it to you that way, and then maybe you can watch it back again to follow along. But it's a slightly different mechanism. So there's certain trainings that definitely not say can't be done online, but the most value can be derived when you're in person because of the access to the trainer directly and of course the hardware. Yeah.
Cool. So before I move to the next question, I just want to let the audience know that at the end, if you have any question, we will leave 5-10 minutes for you to ask, and then we let these guys answer since they will not know what you're going to ask. It's fun. Okay. We partially covered this. I think Nicola already gave some good indication, but Khalifa, what would you suggest to, let's say, a person that never deliver a training, but have maybe a very good expertise and knowledge on a domain that is not yet, let's say, public knowledge? How would you suggest to approach the delivery of a training?
Yeah. First of all, being a security expert or being really smart in cybersecurity doesn't mean that you can be a good trainer. So if you want to deliver training, I really highly recommend to develop yourself in delivering the trainings and also in writing good content for the delivery. So these are the main two things, because at the end, you might have really nice information. You might have really something that maybe a lot of people don't know. But at the end, how you deliver this information and how do you deliver this content, I think it matters a lot. So that's why I think these two things that anyone needs to get into the cybersecurity training, they need to develop on these two parts.
Cool. And Tim, I'm going to ask you the same question also, because with your access to students from the academia side, I guess that this question may come to you quite often.
Yes, true. Yeah. So I basically recommend two things. The first thing is that you have to get some experience, some knowledge in teaching, and best in a scenario where people won't kill you afterward if you didn't deliver. So I always recommend perhaps try to give a guest lecture at the university, for instance, just to give a small talk, or to go to a conference like CCC or Hack in the Box or so, and try to give a small workshop, like 2 to 3 hours, to a specialized topic you would like to give trainings in, and just take a small subset, prepare something, and see how class goes, how people interact, how people recognize you, how you can help people, and see the feedback. Take the feedback and improve into the next iteration. So basically start small, and over time you get some content, and at some point in time you can then deliver it professionally. This is the one thing. The other thing is people often are trained to sit for their computers and analyze problems and look for it 2 hours. So they have the knowledge, but they can't easily communicate it because they are not used to it. So I always recommend them to start streaming, or they don't. So like working and filming while they work. So for instance, just by practicing talking live what you think and what you do, such that other third parties they don't have to exist, but in theory that they could understand what you do. Perhaps start on your own for some time, and then just choose a group of friends and do something like that, such that your friends can give you feedback, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they couldn't follow, or maybe even do a YouTube channel and just try some small videos or some life hacking. So getting used to that, getting used to speaking in public and formulating what you are doing helps a lot.
Cool.
I really think you should not involve money at the very beginning. Your training will not be good enough to take money for it. And I think that's the case for everybody. So well-known conferences like the Dutch or German hacker camps, that's perfect venues to give workshops. You can have one workshop a day and nobody will complain. Nobody will join maybe, but at least you have some opportunity to train. You can go to your local school high school, they will probably be quite grateful. And because, yeah, it's never right on the first try. Like, I think it's very, very hard.
Okay, let me revise the question a little bit for you, because you already answered partially before with the workshop concept, but what suggestion would you do to yourself 10 years ago, now that you deliver this training to hundreds, if not thousands of people? What did you learn in these 10 years that you didn't know 10 years ago and that now you wish you knew?
That's a good question. Hard. That I will keep being stressed every Thursday for every session for my whole life, apparently. Well, from the teaching point of view, people won't understand things as you do. That's the most critical part. Like, even if it's very clear for you, it's not, it may not be the way to share the information. Sometimes I train users to do it differently from what I do in real life, because in real life I will use shortcuts, and these shortcuts will negatively impact the easiness of memorizing the task. So I go through very small steps, and I think that's the main takeaway. If I want to teach something which is complex, I will start with a dub example and explaining the basics, like the terminology, the GUI part of the tool. And then when that's okay, we add some complexity on top, never going too fast. Because if you go too fast, it looks like an exploit, like they did it once, but they
didn't learn.
Yes, exactly. They just did it. And then
they memorized it, but they didn't learn. They memorized the step, but they didn't know what's actually
they will not be able to do it by themselves in, let's say, 2 months, which is technically the goal.
Yeah. And this actually brings me to the next question. So, how do you prepare the student? How a student should prepare himself before attending the training, and how they can use the knowledge that they acquire during the training to maintain or to upskill their daily activities. And I guess the question for you is maybe even a bit simpler than for other type of trainings, because your training has a very practical usage that they can start from day zero. Bug bounty, for instance, you teach web application pen testing tricks, right? So tomorrow I can open a bug bounty. I go on HackerOne, I register, and I can start experimenting from day zero. But it's not the same for every type of training. Some trainings require access to maybe some more specialized environment, and therefore it's not as easy. But in your case, how would you recommend a student to get ready for your course in order to acquire as much knowledge as possible?
So getting ready, I think it's different for on-site and online sessions. On-site, don't go to the club the night before. Seriously, like Amsterdam, I saw weird stuff. Like people enjoy the night too much, and then they don't really enjoy the training because they are sleepy. And
that's why Dylan is planning the next Stack in the Box in Phuket, because there is nothing else to do, right?
Yeah, you focus.
And for online sessions, most of the time, people don't, protect the time they will spend on the training. So they will get outside interactions. It could be family-based. It could be the colleagues calling you, etc. And I already think that given the cost of the training, the cost of not doing any consulting task during these days, it's really efficient to protect your time as much as possible. So during the day, being available and not on call with somebody else. And during the evening, taking some, relaxing and getting some sleep in order to be efficient for 4 days, because I think my training is quite demanding. Like they will fry their brain. That's my point, my goal. And so I need them to be like totally ready for the training. But it's like basic stuff, but being relaxed and being not busy elsewhere during online sessions.
Yeah. And Tim, instead, your type of training is a bit more complex to be applicable after the end. So do you provide any content for them to...
Yeah, so what I do is basically I reach out 2 weeks beforehand and tell them how the setup will be like. For instance, if it's online training, I say we use Zoom and we use Discord. They should install the apps and take care everything works beforehand and stuff like that. So test the microphone setup. If it's not a remote class, I just tell them to have fun more or less. But the main thing is for my training, I only need a virtual machine. So I provide them with a link to the virtual machine and tell them how to set it up. But if there are other trainings, like you do a hardware-based training, you of course have to send them hardware and something like that. So for me, it's important that my students 2 weeks before the training know everything that they can prepare beforehand, such that they can immediately start. And then also during the training, of course, the best advice is to keep your time, that you don't work on other problems right now, like some work stuff that pops up or something like that, because then switching between those topics is really demanding.
I see. And what about the afterwards? So let's say that I attend your training. We finish. How do you suggest I can apply that knowledge? Do you provide me with a laboratory that do you suggest to have laboratories that last longer?
Well, yes. Well, first, there are way more materials I could ever cover in class, or some which just give another perspective of things and stuff like that. So I tell them that there's an after class that they can join. There's a Discord where they can keep in contact with me to discuss things, or they could look at specific malware samples, or they could write protections on their own. So basically, there are a lot of ways to follow up. This is the one thing. The other thing is one has to keep in touch is that not everybody has the same goals with going into the trainings. For one, they might be interested in one topic in particular, while they don't need 60% of the other things. But it might still be interesting for them, but it wouldn't make much sense to keep up and learn everything in depth, because maybe they need to know one thing in depth, but for others they know that it exists such that they can use it at a different point in time. So it doesn't make any sense to keep up and focus on that and poorly. I always recommend my students, so they should work on their own stuff if they don't like a topic that much. Or if they're already aware of that, because they might be more productive if they deepen on the things they find more interesting.
I see. And Khalifa, your training on the other side is not really just a virtual machine, but there is like a laboratory, a cloud environment, on-prem environment. How do you manage the complexity and giving access to students to this environment to be managed by yourself, but at the same time delivering the training? Is it an environment that the student will be able to access later? Because if I attend your training and you provide me with a very complex Azure Active Directory environment, and at the end I need to keep practicing, shall I be able to reproduce it? Probably not.
So this is really a really nice question. First of all, from our experience, we tried to avoid as much as possible, like letting the students during the training to do anything with the lab itself, because as you said, our lab is a bit complex, like it needs different machines and so on. So I don't want the student to waste his time. Just, like he has an issue in the VMware and he has something in the one of the virtual machines and so on. So all our lab is on the cloud, and all what the students need only is the RDP connection, so they can connect to the host machine, and the host machine has all the virtual machines set up. This is the first thing. So, and we try to make the lab as smooth as possible with automation and so on. So even if we faced any issues, we have already also some of the scripts that we can automate some of the parts and re-automate them again. And after the training, we provide them with at least 2 to 3 weeks access to the same lab so that they can still use the same scenarios that learned during the training to practice, to keep practicing. And also we encourage them to build their own lab, which is, I think, the best thing for them to move, like to maintain the skills and even to develop new skills.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. And Dillon, what about from a conference point of view? What type of weird requests did you get before the training or after the training from attendees that want to get the most of the experience in the training?
I think when it comes down to any training or anything that you're trying to learn, right, you have to ask yourself, why are you attending the training? Because a lot of times, sometimes the HR, whatever, will decide, are you going to go for this course, right? Then you don't really care about it. So then you're going to come and like, yeah, whatever, any kind of training. Because you didn't really pay for it. But if you're paying for it, it's your own money. You probably want to ask yourself, what do I want to get out of it? As in, what am I struggling with? Because, yeah, sure, as Tim said, maybe 60% of the content might not be relevant to you, or you kind of know it, but you don't really need to know it that in depth. But I'm sure there's something that's really 100% that you really need to know. And you might as well use the time and the interaction that you have with the trainer to get those things addressed and practice those things. And then you really maximize, it'll be more value for you that way. So it's kind of like you need to ask yourself, what exactly are you there for, right? To have a good time, enjoy Amsterdam, or do you really want to learn, right? Like I've signed up for I do music production stuff at the side, right? So I've signed up for like all sorts of different courses. Some are on demand, some are kind of like live, and I usually go in it with kind of an idea of what I'm trying to get out of it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But you have to kind of answer that question yourself. You know what I mean? If not, you're wasting your time, basically. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I have one last question before we see if anyone from the audience have something to ask. And I'm going to ask the same to everyone. So do you see, or do you see the value in the in-person training of having the trainer there in terms of asking more questions, or maybe, maintaining the relationship even afterwards the training, or vice versa, from an online point of view, you get the chance to receive questions, to interact with students that maybe during the training that would be too shy to ask, or they don't, feel very comfortable in exposing some lacks of knowledge, some gaps in the skills compared to maybe other attendees of the same training in the same room, where you have a top student that knows everything and the other ones gets a bit scared of the confrontation.
For on-site sessions, I think the bigger advantage is to build relationships. Like, it's very hard to build relationships over a webcam. I can't, at least. And so the students start building their own network, own professional network, by going to conferences, attending trainings, and meeting the same people again and again. On the other side, migrating to online offers, usually we have more persistence. Like, we have cloud-based infrastructures for like Kalisha. I do the same for my trainings. We have Discord on the side, and usually we retain some of the students on the Discord server, so that build a community with a very specific knowledge and goals. So that's quite good, I think, from the online point of view. But I have a hard time bridging from online sessions to on-site, physical interactions. Like, I don't know them if I add them as online students, opposite to physical trainings.
Tim.
Yeah,
please.
At conferences, I basically agree. So at conferences, there happens a lot of in the non-training times. Like, you have lunch together, you have dinner together, you see each other, you talk in the 5-minute breaks and stuff like that. And this builds relationships. This is the one thing. The other thing is, I encourage my students to bring in their own problems. And then I can go around and take time, sit with them together, and have a closer look at their individual problems and apply my knowledge there and help them getting focused on their stuff. And this is something which doesn't work in an online scenario. In an online scenario, people are less specific, more generalized. On the other hand, some people attend the training and ask questions who never would done it in real life. Perhaps due to money and travel restrictions, but also because of social things. They have family, they can't leave their home, or they are too shy to talk to other people, and so they have the anonymity of the internet and can ask via direct messages or something like that. And yes, so I think everything has its advantages and disadvantages, yeah.
You see. Khalifa?
Yeah. From my opinion, honestly, and also my personal preference, I prefer the on-site or in-person trainings because it's more engaging, and I think, as they explained, also the discussion that happens between the students sitting with each others are really add a lot of value to the training itself. And on the other hand, I don't have much experience in the online training. I've done it only once, so I cannot really tell how it feels, honestly.
I see. But I think more or less everyone agrees on the in-person training. It's much easier to build the relationship, and maybe that is very useful at the beginning of your career because you are building your network at the end of the day. And as Nicola said, this network is going to be more or less at not every conference, but you're going to see each other often when you participate at such event. While the online allows you maybe to have more personal type of questions, or if you are very shy, allows you to actually keep the interaction going even after the training ends, because maybe you have a common Discord channel or maybe just by email, because you always communicated online. So you are used to this type of interaction. I see. Cool. Okay. So what about from the audience? Any questions? Please. Do we have a mic? Okay. Here. Above, yep.
So Dylan talked about sometimes you have somebody in your training that is just not there because he wants to be. I was thinking, do you have tips or techniques to basically to get that person more engaged, or maybe even before the training? Do you have tips how to encourage other people to go for cybersecurity training, for instance?
Who wants to start? Nicola, you start.
Good. If the student is not engaged in the training, it will be hard to do anything. On site, during the training, it will be nearly impossible because we are fully busy on giving the training itself. I think something went wrong before. If the students are not engaged in the training, maybe the trainings are not what they are looking for. In my situation, I'm quite lucky because for online trainings, people already fight their manager and the manager of their manager to get a seat at my training. So they are quite motivated, and I never had this situation. But I don't have any solution, but I think it would be terrible for the trainer too, to see people who are just bored. And
it will feel like high school, when you are the professor and you have a class of kids that don't really care what you're saying.
Yeah, but that looks terrible. Their job look much harder than mine. People are willing to take the training, and we have some basic ground about things we like we like to compromise websites. So that's a building that's already nice. And I think that teaching in a high school where people are just seated because they have to, that's probably very, very difficult, from a motivational point of view.
Tim.
Giving university lectures, it's quite common that only 20% of the students really are excited about your stuff, while all others look bored or think where I should go, why I'm here. So this is a really good training for the trainer. So talking about the industry trainings, it happens way less. That it's basically once every 5 trainings where there's one person who is there who doesn't want to be there. So maybe because because his company said you have to go there, and hey, Amsterdam party, I go for it. So this does happen sometimes. And honestly, for these people, I try to tell them I'm here anytime, but I don't want to bore you. So if it's okay for me, if you have to be here because you have to be here, but you don't want to be here, well, it's fine for me. So I don't care as long as the person doesn't disturb or the other students. So for instance, I once had somebody who was gaming inside there, and then sorry, this doesn't work. So you annoy a lot of people here. But if you irgendwie work on something or write mails or something like that, go for it.
Did it ever happen to you that someone was expecting a type of content that was different? So the let's say the expectation of the type of material was different. The knowledge that you would get is different from what you were planning to deliver?
Yes, this sometimes happens. But then it's also, you have to find a common base. What were your expectations? What went wrong? Maybe you are not that experienced as you thought it'd be, or the course is too slow. Then I basically have to counteract and give you more content. So that's basically then, if I notice that people are bored, I give them more content. And if it's too slow, I try that they learn at least something. But, not in any case you can find the perfect solution.
I think that, being bored because they go too fast, that's easy to manage. Yeah. Like you need to have some extra material on the side, like very hard and very demanding, and you just give them the content. But if they are bored because they don't like the subject, like what can you do? Like nothing. You just give them some freedom. Go for a coffee or whatever, don't bother.
I mean, we've had attendees show up for trainings with an iPad. Like exploit writing class, right? With an iPad and hey, how do I do this training, man? I'm like, clearly you didn't really want to come for this training. Somebody just asked you to go for it. And you're like, what do I have in my house? My iPad. Let me just take this, go for conference. Yeah.
Khalifa?
Yeah, I think from my opinion, also from my personal experience, also being as a student before, I think this is a habit that you need to develop. You have to develop something called distraction management. You have to train yourself how to be focused within the classes and how to not be distracted with your phone and so on. And also, I believe there is a big role also on the trainer himself. He needs also to engage the students, to wake them up a little bit. Maybe sometimes he need to throw jokes, and they should be funny jokes, of course, not silly jokes. So,
ideally,
these kind of things, I think, will let the students pay more attention.
I had one question that I kept as a bonus in case we had a shy audience, which thanks God we don't, which was about how do you keep yourself up to date. Now I will add learning jokes. That's something that you need to have for...
Yes, exactly.
Questions? Yes.
Thanks. It's an interesting panel. Sorry. I have a question for you. Just with your given expertise in the years in the field that you've all had, where do you see what tools, what open source tools and projects can we work on that are involving with AI, neural networks, machine learning? Where do you see this impacting our field first, so we can start to work on them now?
Who wants to start?
I can take that. So basically, I love AI stuff, right? If you've been to Hack in the Box before, I used to run an AI village with some hacker detector and stuff. So I was really into it. But where to get into? I mean, I would say prompt engineering, man. Because literally, it's ChatGPT, obviously. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. AutoGPT as well. I mean, they're really going to change a lot of things, man, in ways that we haven't even begin to imagine. You know what I mean? And it's going to come a lot quicker than we expect. So it's better to just kind of like play around with it now and then try and look at how you might possibly apply it. Maybe today you might not really use it because it's not that great yet, but it's just kind of like keep the focus there because, you know, tomorrow is another day, right?
I would say it's a good assistant, like even for writing materials. Like you can express a few points, and it will create a basic structure with some public content. I mean, you will get only public information. So everything which is state of the art, you will add it by yourself. But from two sentences to 5 paragraphs in 1 minute. That's doable with ChatGPT. And then, of course, you need some added value. Like, you can't stop there. Yeah, maybe that's the future. Like, maybe all the boring stuff we do right now, we will have to explain ORCIDs. And yeah, for sure, we did that for years. And we were like highly paid professionals and still doing like putting 2 sentences in 5 paragraphs. It was part of our job. And they will be like surprised. But I'm not sure it will change everything in teaching. Like, teaching is still human to human, I think. But for building the content, yes, it's useful.
Take a look at AutoGPT, man. You might change your mind. The AutoGPT stuff is quite interesting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just does it, like, and nobody can explain how. You know what I mean? That's what's mind blowing. You know, it's like, it's a language model. How is it possible that it can derive, well, I wouldn't say meaning, but, you know, it can kind of figure stuff out, right? Like,
and if you could imagine, is it on? Yeah, you get it. If you can imagine putting a neural network on that, and then, example, making some crazy burp suite extension that just runs all exploits immediately. I mean, where are the first possibilities? Where can we work on this now so we can build it for the future?
Try it, man.
Actually, I am.
So, Nicola, we actually have a BARP extension that
I need to answer this point. Some of my students play with ChatGPT version 3 or 3.5 and asking for burp extensions, and they were generated. And then I review them, like looking for negative points to say. And there was one missing Python statement, one import something, and the other one I complain about the quality of the regular expression. That's all.
And that's GPT-3, right? Like, yes, GPT-4, right? So GPT-4 is out. So if you just think 6 months time, 1 year's time, 2 years time, what GPT would be at? 8, 6, I don't know. But whatever it is, it's going to be like, you know, leaps and bounds ahead, I think.
To add on that, so it won't replace any expert anytime soon, but it's really supportive in experts. So as long as you ask us for guidance, it helps a lot. I also use this live in classes, in university classes, where I just put, hey, I have this problems. What are some strategies to tackle this problem? And then it makes you suggestions. And then you as expert have to decide what fits to your use case and what does not. And seeing that and teaching that to students is a really great opportunity that they learn how to approach such problems.
Yeah, I think with the model at the moment, GPT, what you're referring to, it's kind of a sort of, how do I say it, like a gimmick at the moment. You give it some text and it will give you Mozart Symphony. But like, to be more like specific, take a neural network, for example, it learns and then learns itself based on what's in front of it, like self-driving cars, for example. Where do you see that coming into the cybersecurity? Where do you see that coming in first? Like Wireshark, for example, or Metasploit? Could you see it being implemented in Metasploit?
I wouldn't put it past it that somebody's already tried it because, I mean, DEF CON had the AI versus AI CTF thing, right?
We saw a lot of implementation from the defensive side.
Yeah,
we had
Carnegie Mellon, I think, did something, right?
Hours ago about the antivirus and the type of technology they use in order to improve detection. I think that's probably one of the area where the focus is going to be, and how we can apply these newer models to maybe data that you already have from the past.
In 2019, we did an AI challenge where it was to take known malware and then disassemble it using AI and reassemble it that it would pass signature-based checks. And we had startups that actually submitted their papers. And that was 2019, right? It's quite some time ago. And I'm sure that research has definitely been taken to the nth degree. And of course, there's lots of research that we just doesn't see the light of day. We just haven't heard about it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? China, I'm sure, is working on a lot of interesting stuff. Google has a lot of models that they're not releasing. OpenAI, obviously. So, just because we haven't heard about it doesn't mean it's not there, I think. It's better to assume that it's already there or somebody's trying it out. And it's just when it's ready to make the headlines and they got a cool name for it, then we'll hear about it.
Okay. One more question?
I think
Yeah.
Are we out of time or? Yeah? Cool.
We are out of time, but still, let's...
It's a short question.
There's beer outside, by the way, so... Go ahead. I'm joking. Go ahead, bro, go ahead.
I found it interesting that you said it's easier to engage with people in online lectures. Because for online trainings, I had the exact opposite impression, because a lot of the students of these kinds of courses are introvert, let's say. But if you meet them in person, it's kind of easier to get them to engage with you. Whereas in online trainings, I've made the experience that people really hide behind their screen share. And they don't want to turn on the webcam because they don't want to show the environment. They don't want to turn on the microphone because they can be shy, let's say, in front of their computer. So since you had the opposite impression, I wanted to ask, do you have any tips or how do you get your participants to engage in online courses that much?
In online courses, I don't force my students to put on the webcam or so. I tell them it's fine for me if you do, but otherwise it's also fine. Also, I don't encourage them to use the microphone to ask questions. I tell them, take what's easier for you. Take Discord, the public channel, or ask in the Zoom meeting, for instance. But also, I tell them you can also direct message me. And then at some point in time, during the first day, I will basically, from my side, contact all of them in a private chat, such that I did the first step. And then it's up to them to ignore me or to answer me. And in my experience, everybody will at least answer you with sorry, I'm shy, or sorry, something like that, but then they will answer you. And then it has been some kind of contact. They might not ask all questions then, but most of them do. So I try to basically don't force them and do the first step, and then they may respond better.
Okay, does that work to synchronize the group? Because especially at conference trainings, it's really difficult, as you mentioned, to kind of get everybody on the same page, very different backgrounds. With this strategy, does it work well to get a feeling for who has what skill level so you can synchronize the group? Like, does that work well with this, approaching them?
Yes, it works.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I think it's nearly impossible to get your students with a webcam on for 4 days. I mean, as a student, I will not support it. Like, you are at home, life is happening around you. Maybe you don't want to show your face for 8 hours a day. Maybe you will have lunch during the meeting when I'm talking about something. And I have no expectations about webcams outside of the introduction point. Like we take like a few minutes for each student. And then I tell them it would be appreciated to have the webcam on for especially this part. But for the remaining part of the training, I'm talking to myself. Like I have my own video feedback and I'm talking to myself. And something else, I refuse questions over DM, because my understanding is that for one people asking a question, there's 10 people interested in the answer. So I always force them to ask questions on the public, private, but the shared Discord server. So they see the questions of other one, and they take some value back from the answers I will provide.
Khalifa, anything to?
The online training?
No. Okay. I think now we can follow Dylan's suggestion and grab some drinks outside.